Good morning, everybody. It is Monday, May 18th in the year of our Lord 2020.
Yep. Good morning. Morning, Kathleen. Thanks for logging on early to say hi to us. Appreciate that.
And this morning, this is episode 35. We're talking about going back to normal. We've talked about this a little bit before, but we're going to dive more into it because there's really a big push to go back to normal right now. But first, for those who haven't watched before, I'm Mark Van Steenwyk. I'm the director for the Center for Prophetic Imagination.
And I'm Daniel Wolpert. I direct MICA, Minnesota Institute of Contemplation and Healing. And yeah, I've just been feeling really strange these last few days because apparently the pandemic is over. And
Yeah.
I sort of missed that.
Trump fixed it.
I guess. Yeah, so there's been just this really strange thing where suddenly everybody's talking about opening up, going back to normal. We live here in Minnesota, so we're surrounded by Iowa, North and South Dakota, and Wisconsin. And all four of those states either never closed down really to begin with or are now opened up. And so there are these pictures of just like all these people in restaurants and bars and, everything's fine all of a sudden.
This is great.
And as far as I can tell, nothing has changed. So I'm really confused.
Mm-hmm. Even in Minnesota, we've lifted. Today was the first day that groups of 10 could gather.
Right.
Yep. And then there's kind of limited ways you can go back to some of the things.
And when you go,
Mall of America,
right? Mall of America is going to be opening in the next week, I think. And yeah, when you go out and about, there's just tons of people out. You go to stores, very few people wearing masks. Everybody's doing their thing. Traffic's way back up. Mm-hmm. And as I said, as far as I can tell, nothing's different. But apparently we've gone from a pandemic that are going to kill millions to a back to work campaign. And it just feels very, very strange to me.
I mean,
maybe I'm the only one that feels that way.
I feel like the pressure put on to reopen has been successful. I think that's part of it. So you have, there was a time when Trump was kind of feigning that this was a big deal.
Right.
And so now, we were talking before this broadcast about Health and Human Services Director or Secretary Alex Azar, who's a former pharma lobbyist and executive. It's basically saying, things can go back to normal. Yet Donald Trump Jr. saying that this is all pretty much a liberal hoax. Right. They said that at the beginning, but now they're saying it again.
They're saying it again.
So it doesn't really seem to signify this, like, okay, we're done with this.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And so, it, well, and then Azar gets on the broadcast yesterday on the Sunday morning shows and says basically the reason a lot of people have died is it's Black people's fault for being sick and unhealthy. That was really great.
That's saying that sort of stuff is normal in our society.
Right.
So we're already back to normal there.
Yeah, and then it's, the CDC's fault somehow. I don't really know how, but they seem to be the latest fall guy type person.
Because they're the deep state. So
yeah, the deep state. And so it just, again, one of the things that I feel like, we've talked a lot about is this whole issue of these frames of reference that take us out of reality, right? That we adopt. And, and this seems to me to now just be this other one, right? That, well, if I pretend this virus doesn't exist, then I guess it won't exist. And it's very hard for me to understand what exactly is going through people's minds other than some sort of tremendous level of denial where they can just suddenly imagine that everything's okay, and then of course the few places that are not opening up, then get criticized as somehow being hysterical or ridiculous. And so we continue along in this bizarre state of, of delusion, I think, pretty much.
Yeah. It's hard not to see the last few years as being kind of sinister preparation for this level of reality denying.
Yeah.
I mean, it's to the point like, and this isn't just something happening to conservatives. Like,
No.
This whole new landscape, which is just an intensification of the way the media worked before. Because Fox News has been around for a while, things just intensified under Trump, and Trump can just say all kinds of different things that contradict all the time. And then I think that just affects everybody. So like even
Right.
Democrats are just kind of like falling to the same level of stupidity generally. It's just maybe not the same depth or negative consequence, but so it's really actually hard to know what's real.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we don't want to minimize that and act like somehow that we are the pure critical thinkers and they're the dummies. It's really actually hard.
No, it is. You get drawn into this vortex of, I've been describing a lot as kind of the shitstorm, right? Where you literally imagine, that you're just swirling in shit. And so, so you can't see anything. So we got some folks logging on with some comments. So maybe somebody is less confused than me.
Yeah, just a few comments. People saying hello. Thanks for commenting, John. It is a huge deal, and it's frustrating because I don't see a lot of people talking about it well. Series writes, "Back to normal is gaslighting."
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's this. We know that things. There's a couple levels of this. Things weren't normal before, like in a good way. Normal wasn't good. So people are being gaslit into being told that was actually good. And that already happened during the election cycle anyways. Like somehow going back to Obama era policies was considered like a win. And if you disagreed with that, you were gaslit, called crazy for that. And now if you think things are actually worse now and I don't want us to still reopen, you're told you're being literally crazy by the president and other folks.
Right. And for those of you that are not familiar with that term, so gaslighting comes from this great movie, old black and white film called Gaslight, which is about this guy that drives his wife crazy. And the term actually comes from the old style of lights in houses where you actually had gas lights in houses. And so this guy is driving his wife crazy by turning off and on the gas for the lights and then telling her that that's not really happening. So that's been picked up as this term which basically means you're being told something is true or not true when the opposite is the case.
And so that you start questioning what's real.
Yeah.
Angel writes, that shows the power of media. I hope the virus now knows that its role is to not exist as a threat anymore.
Right, exactly. I mean, that's the thing that's so wild about this, right? It's as if, now the virus is going to behave differently because we say it's so. Mm-hmm. Which again is just, this delusion, and it really shows up more and more in powerful people, right? Is this very old kind of delusion of like, I can become God and control anything. And, one of my favorite stories about this is Edward I of England, who thought that he could stop the tide. And he was going to prove this by having these people bring his throne down to the ocean during low tide and put it below the tide line, and then he was going to stop the tide from coming in. And he actually did this. I mean, I don't know what was in his mind, but I mean, and of course he and all his courtiers got soaking wet. So this is a very, very old problem. And this is great. We're getting lots of comments.
Kathleen writes, I pastor 2 churches part-time in a rural county. One church is afraid of the virus. The other thinks it's a hoax. I'm in a very difficult situation. I mean, this is what we were talking about before starting today, that we were hoping to find someone. We're going to have a guest to kind of start talking about specifics of the challenges churches face. And you're kind of embodying it right there. Like what church politics is hard enough. You actually have to deal with 2 of them.
Right.
Which sounds really challenging.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And this is a great example, Kathleen, right? I mean, both things cannot be true, right? The virus cannot be real and a hoax at the same time, right? But the fact that here you can have these 2 communities, and they're probably not very far apart from each other geographically, who have adopted a totally different stance to reality, really embodies what we're seeing in terms of the way the United States is dealing with this, right? That you actually have created, again, this maelstrom of delusion that allows for a very large population to have completely different versions of what is real and what is not, which obviously makes functioning as a coherent whole almost impossible. So Karen's got a comment.
My ancestors already died to make elite people money. Capitalism has normalized exploitation. Another comment from Karen, just to put them together. People can't pay their bills and don't understand that the wealth is unfairly distributed in this country. Canada is paying citizens $2,000 a month for at least the next 4 months. That's the other thing, like we were talking about before, the way in which resentments are being stirred up in this, which has always been a tactic from the powerful, is to like get particularly white working class people to blame poorer people or people of other ethnicities or whatever, just so that it's like the reason that Reagan really popularized this idea of the welfare queen. Right. Yep. So right now, people getting free money when I have to go work is being
right. And so you know, and I'm seeing this constantly, right? So and there's 2 versions of it. Mm-hmm. So one is that people who have lost their jobs and are on unemployment are making more money than they did when they were working. I was just talking with a friend of mine yesterday about this, right? And he's in Vermont. And so he said, he works with this nonprofit that helps people with housing and different issues there. And he said, what we're seeing is that people that were just scraping by with 2 crappy part-time jobs are now making more money on unemployment. And so then, of course, there's this big push to let's get these people off unemployment and back to their 2 crappy jobs that we can make more money off of them doing, right?
Yeah.
So there's that. Then there's the other thing of the people who are still working their low-wage crappy job because they're an essential worker, and so they're in danger and they're not making enough to get by. They're looking at the people who are on that unemployment, and then it's, the rats eating each other in the sinking ship. So then they're going to fight each other. And again, all of this is this pushing, and Chris Christie said this a couple weeks ago. He's like, more people are going to die. We just need to get back to normal. Well, who is it that's going to die? It's, as you said, Karen, it's your ancestors, it's Black and brown people and poor white people. And that's what the country has always been based on. And so the motivation then to get back to normal is to get the system revved up again and back in place.
Mm-hmm. A couple more comments. Series, seeing how other countries who handle the pandemic better, that saves both lives and jobs without fascism, is like waking up to the fact that child abuse and neglect should not be national policy.
Yes.
Damn.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Series, just brilliant. I mean, there's this this is this other alternate reality phenomenon, right? Because this is happening worldwide, we're getting to actually watch other cultures dealing with this, right? And so, New Zealand just put out its national budget last week.
Mm-hmm.
And, the prime minister gave this speech sort of publicizing this and basically said, our national budget is now not going to be about economic growth. It's going to be about people's health. And they listed these priorities. It's going to be about mental health. It's going to be about physical public health. It's going to be about, preventing child abuse and domestic violence. I mean, listed off all these things, and you're watching this, and it's like, watching this other world unfold, and you just think, man, and they've got hobbits. Like, what, it just doesn't get any better than that. So, Adam, what's Adam got here?
We've also gotten into this place of partisan realities from a culture where everyone gets to be right. If someone is wrong, both people have to be wrong. And not being able to speak truth, like when a bully hurts someone and both the offender and victim need to apologize to each other. Yes, oh my gosh. This is like, our system was almost designed to be this way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what? This is a really interesting side effect of the movement towards postmodernism in academia. I mean, we could probably do a whole episode just on this. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you really could, right? So this, and again, it's like the conspiracy theories, right? So you take a little piece of something that is true and interesting, and then you blow it into this nonsensical thing, right? And so this idea of postmodernism, which very succinctly, a whole set of philosophical conversations moving out of this modernist or the idea of one objective reality, right? And talking about the fact that truth can be a spun thing, there can be different narratives, all of that, then gets popularized into, well, there are no facts, right? That's the populist version of postmodernism. And I had somebody the other day say to me, well, you have your facts and I have my facts. And those were opposite sets of facts. And it's like, no, that's actually not how things work. But yeah, I mean, if that's the world that we're in, then right, you cannot say anything solid about anything, and then it becomes very, very difficult to function. So I like that. Gee,
you're making the American dream sound like a myth.
Sorry.
I don't know how to embody that. The colon, capital P. That's the other thing. The reason that this is hard, one of the reasons, is that people really believe the American dream. And so when it doesn't work for them, you have to blame somebody.
Right.
Blaming pandemics is hard. So we say, I got to blame people. And so the reason that our economy is bad is because of people, and we're conditioned to blame certain kinds of people. And so this is the thing we've been saying from day one, like this leads to fascism.
Yeah.
And we can't just buy into the idea that we're in it together, because we're not. Because the people with power aren't in it with us. Not really.
Yeah.
The pandemic doesn't discriminate against people, except when our society makes people more vulnerable than other people.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the very key thing, because that often gets lost in this idea of, oh, the virus doesn't discriminate. Well, I mean, that's true if like everybody's lined up outside somewhere and somebody comes along and shoves virus in your face,
or sprays corona in their eyes.
Right? Yeah. Right. I mean, then that's true. The virus would not discriminate against any of those people. But we have to recognize that society is set up with huge boundaries, obstacles, systems that actually do allow the virus to discriminate. The virus itself doesn't discriminate, but when the virus comes into contact with our social ecology, it definitely does discriminate.
That's
and
right.
We have seen that in spades, right? Every single city, every single place that this has gone. You know, New Orleans, one example, 80% of the deaths are Black people. And I can promise you they are not 80% of the population of New Orleans.
Mhm.
Okay, a few more things.
We live in a culture where everyone can justify any position by saying, just my opinion.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And opinions and facts have now become the same thing.
Karen writes, postmodernism has been adulterated into there are no facts. That is an amazingly on-point analysis.
Yeah. Thanks, Karen.
Bobby, I'm not sure I understand everything in this comment, but there's a real conversation about the possibility of human challenge studies and testing. Once approved by the FDA, I have a feeling that folks will be timid in showing up. I'm not sure what exactly that's talking about.
Yeah, Bobby, maybe you could say a few more things. Bobby's an Chinese medicine specialist and acupuncturist at the Penny George. The human challenge studies and testing. That'd be great to say more about that. Not sure what that is.
Karen writes, when the virus comes into contact with their social ecology, the virus does discriminate. You're a gem dropper. Dan, you're a gem dropper today.
I'm a gem dropper. That's beautiful. That sounds beautiful.
My nerd brain associates gem dropping with what happens when you kill a monster in a video game. So I don't know how that applies to you, Dan.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, well, or you get certain rewards in a video game, and then the gems come out.
Yeah. Or there's coins above your head. You know, that kind of
that kind of stuff. Hey, I'm all over that.
Yeah,
I'm all over that. Yeah. So again, all of this confusion, right? And you know, I think Mark, what you said is so important, right? Because self-compassion in the midst of the shitstorm is really important, right? Is that this is hard.
It is hard.
I mean, this is hard. Like when you are getting no national guidance, when you are getting constant confusion, when you are being, you know, having total ridiculous stuff thrown at you all the time, and you're just sort of an average person who's maybe lost their job, or you don't know if you're going to lose their job, or you're at your home, you can't talk to any of your friends in person. Like, it is very hard to figure out what's going on. And so it's important for us to not only have empathy for ourselves and each other, but again, and this is something we keep coming back to, how can we form saner communities? Okay, Bobby's got some info for us.
So human challenge studies infect volunteers and sidesteps phase 3 trials to see if drugs or vaccines work or work well. Okay. So so if that's what we're trying to do, I can see that being a slow going. Also some corrections here. Gem dropping is when you are stating profound truth.
Yes.
It's super hip hop, dropping gems. I appreciate that, but I'm going to always associate it with hundreds of hours spent playing foolish video games as a child.
Yeah, see, Karen, that's what I figured that you meant.
Yeah,
I appreciated that, and Mark knew that too. But
I was just adding comedic.
The gems in video games.
Yeah,
you want those gems. Isn't it like Mario? You hit these little things, and I'm hearing the Mario Kart sound.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Bobby's going to volunteer for those studies.
Oh yeah, we'll always welcome volunteers for those studies.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, and this is the thing, you know, again, and this is just an extension of things that have already happened, right? And Karen pointed this out, you know, that, I mean, we don't often talk about the fact that for years now, there have been people who have been having to make their living donating plasma, being part of drug trials for, you know, pharmaceutical studies, you know, essentially renting themselves out as guinea pigs, because that's the only way that they can make a living in our society. And, you know, of course, that's going to continue again here. You know, and a great example is not only this whole vaccine stuff, but all of these other various drug trials that are going on for this stuff now. And yeah, I mean, there are people that are going to sign up if they get paid enough because they don't have any other way to make a living.
Karen writes, I knew that you knew. Lol. Just wanted to clarify. I knew that you knew that
I knew that you knew that we knew.
Here's a comment from John.
Yeah.
Much of our country has been conditioned to accept a variety of facts through the Bible-believing churches, where hundreds of denominations and sects have the absolute truth, which is at odds with every other denomination or sect's absolute truth. And then, of course, there's a lot of science denial in some of these.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, and the science denial piece, again, all of these are like streams that feed into this, right? So, you know, for years now, and a lot of my friends in the South have been talking about this for a long time. You have had a whole generation who have migrated out of the public schools into Christian schools, and they're by and large white kids and families who have migrated into these Christian schools, many of which literally do not teach any science at all, right? So the only science class that they have is creationism. And so you now have this entire cohort, this huge cohort. You know, for example, one of my friends told me that in her entire county in Louisiana, there was not one white child in a public school in an entire county. And so you have this enormous cohort of folks who have been in that kind of environment that, John, you're talking about. And of course, they are ripe for all of the BS about what's going on now. And for all of the hoax stuff and for all of the conspiracy theories, robot birds, the whole 9 yards.
Well, another thing that's already feels like back to normal is there have been a plethora of theological and quasi-theological texts written about the coronavirus already. One of them by our very own local super mega church star, John Piper, where he talks about how coronavirus is wrath from God. So, if you see things this way, these kind of meddling liberal scientist elites who you can't trust, you're going to listen to Piper instead, right? And that's gonna shape your worldview, and you're going to see this as coronavirus as a challenge, the way liberalism is a challenge, right? That you have to fight it not by doing the things to take care of yourself, but by being defiant.
Right.
So it just all makes sense if you're living in that worldview.
All right. So Catherine's coming up with her brilliant show-stopping points here.
A few writers have been drawing the parallel between people's reaction to strict absolute quarantine as our only virus protection and abstinence-only sex ed as protection from STIs. Some people seem to react with denial and high-risk behavior in a situation framed as all or nothing, rather than having info to manage different risks.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, this part of it, there is that all or nothing mentality, which is, again, something that's deeply saturates our culture. It really gets in the way of making a wise decision.
Well, and again, this is another part of the shitstorm, right? Is that the way that we have tried to manage this of basically just saying, go hide out, but we're not really going to tell you what the path is to not hiding out anymore, is ridiculous. I mean, that's been a horrible way to deal with this. And so, of course, at a certain point, people in their homes are just going to be like, I can't do this anymore. I got to get out of here. Right. And so that, again, without any kind of semblance of proper leadership, people are finally going to go, well, you know, the stuff I'm reading and hearing on Fox News and on this YouTube channel tells me I'm going to be fine. So why not? Because I'm really not getting any other good information any other way.
This, you know, and again, this is hard. Like, so I'm a well-educated person, whatever that means. It means that I can at least research data in a reasonable way. And so if I try to figure out what to do, I go on the internet and I look and I see a lot of data that is not being interpreted for me by one trustworthy source. There's just like 15 different news channels that are all putting their own spin on it. And then you kind of, if I never even know when to hear what my governor is talking about with this stuff. It's just sometimes vaguely on NPR. And so it's just not, It's not cohesive. And so how do we expect people to all of a sudden all play by the same rules? There's not the same set of rules.
No, it's not reasonable at all. So, okay, we got a couple last good comments here.
Kathleen writes, in The Plague by Camus, a priest tells the congregation that the plague is judgment for their sins.
Yeah.
That's
That's
kind of right from the old playbook.
Yeah, great book for this time. If you haven't read The Plague, it's a good one.
Adam writes, it's like the idea that if you're trying to cut down on sugar, so you cut down on all sugar, which leads to binging an unhealthy relationship with sugar.
Right.
Yeah. All or not.
No, absolutely. That all or nothing, and that leads to yo-yo dieting. I mean, we could go sort of on and on and on. Right. There is rarely this sort of, this is the healthy path, and it's very, very challenging to find that on your own. Yeah. So
let's let Adam have the last word.
So this is a good last word.
Yeah, it's a great last word. We need information and best practices for caring for each other and ourselves, with an understanding that community is at the heart of humanness.
All right.
Amen.
Yeah. Amen. Great. Well, this has been awesome. All kinds of great comments. Thank you so much, and really appreciate all the nice compliments too. And so we are not broadcasting tomorrow.
Nope.
But we will be back on Wednesday.
Yep. Remember when that was hump day? And now every day is hump day. That's another thing that I want that to go back to normal.
There
Just
you
having
go.
one hump day.
All right.
See you Wednesday.